Okay, very good. Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to this important conference, and it's a pleasure to participate, even virtually. And I have to tell you that I miss very much not being there in warm Colombo, because where I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., it's frigid, really cold weather. So let me start with my presentation, which is coming from a publication that at the Chief Economist Office of the World Bank for South Asia region, we produce a report every 6 months. And this, the latest edition, which we launched a few months ago in October, November, is all focused on women participation and their contribution to economic growth. So let me start off with some motivation. Here we go. So I hope you can see the slide fine. The motivation for our report, this edition, was starting from the observation that only 32% of working women in South Asia are in the labor force. So this is a very low participation rate, as you can see from these graphs. The left-hand side graph shows the participation rate for the countries that we consider being in what we call the South Asia region. And all of them, these bars show the participation rate. All of them are in the bottom quartile. So we divide of all the countries, we divide the countries in the world in 4 groups. The lowest group has participation from 0 to 25, then from 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and so on. So all of the countries apart from Bhutan are all in the bottom quartile. The band, the pinkish band, is the interquartile range from the 25th and 50th percentile of the countries. The center, the graph in the center shows you that these participation rates have not evolved through time. In fact, they have remained quite constant for the last almost 30 years. And note that this is a period of sustained growth in the developing world, and in particular in South Asia. So this graph shows you that this problem is not likely to simply go away with development. Something has to be done. By the way, the diamond, the gold diamond, are the participation of male in the labor force. And the third graph on the right-hand side tries to compare where is South Asia with respect to its own development in terms of female labor force participation. In the literature, there is this U-shaped curve that you can see there, which tells a relationship between level of development and female labor force participation, which starts at low level of development. Participation is very high, then it goes down with development, then it goes back up. But even compared to their level of development, all of the countries in South Asia are well below where they should be given their level of development. So this should give you some motivation. And then we go on and develop a narrative around these 4 main questions. To give you the overall narrative in words, it goes a bit like this: that there is a sort of tension between the development objective of many of the countries. Many of the countries in the region have a very high objective of growth. Some want to be high-income countries in a generation, and so on. However, these goals are a little bit in contrast with this low level of female labor force participation. And the first goal of our report is to show what is the cost in terms of growth, in terms of economic GDP production, of this low level of participation by women. Then we consider what are the obstacles to this to a higher level of participation, and we basically consider aspects from both the supply side and the demand side. And on the demand side, we consider that structural transformation, the transformation of the economy with development, and in particular urbanization, shift towards services, and also opening up to trade, are all creating opportunities for women to participate more. They create jobs for them. However, these opportunities seems not to be taken up as much as one would like because of supply side constraint that are some are low normative social norms, but are also information frictions, discrimination in the labor market. So what we conclude by thinking what could be the actions, the policy remedies to make sure that even more opportunities are created on the demand side, and that these opportunities are really taken up and because of the removal of the supply side constraint. So this is the narrative of the chapter. Now let's go into the details. Let me start off with the first question. What are the costs of having such a low labor force participation? And to answer that question, we basically reverse it and say what would be the impact of on GDP of increasing female labor force participation to the level of male labor force participation. So this is clearly a thought experiment because female labor force participation is not under the control of a policy, and it's endogenous to the development itself, but as a thought experiment, imagine what would happen if women would participate as much as men in all these economies. And the graph to the left shows such an impact. So you have three first year, 2020, 21, and 22, and even 23. What is the level of South Asia real GDP? Which is set equal to 100 for the level of 2023. And then we ran this experiment, we ran some models, and we simulate what would be the increase in GDP if women were to participate as much as men. And the impact is really, really large. And it varies. You see that the bar on the counterfactual in the graph, it varies from 13 to up to 51%. So GDP would be much higher if that participation would materialize. Now, the variation from 13 to 51 is explained by the assumption behind the model. There are several variations of the model. I can't go into the technical details, but the important thing is that there are two factors that influence these impact. The first factor is whether women have the capital to work with, so their productivity doesn't go down, they don't displace men because of when they enter in the labor market. So to get to the maximum level, you need investment, you need fresh capital to provide to this new worker, and these are large investment. And the second factor that explain the difference is whether women can enter any occupations or are segregated to some specific occupation. So when women enter the market, they can enter also the most productive occupation as do men. If these two things materialize, the fact that there is capital and there is freedom and not segregation to go to any occupation, then we get 51. If some of these factor diminishes, then we go to 13. And in any case, the impact is very large. On the right-hand side, you have the same experiment, but disaggregated now by each country in the region. And again, you see the variation that depends on these two factors that I mentioned. And you also notice that some of the countries have potentially a larger impact than even 51%, and that depends on the initial level of participation of women. If the initial level is very low, the impact is obviously larger. Sri Lanka, the country where you are at, is sort of in the middle. But again, even in the best scenario, the impact for Sri Lanka could be well above 40%. So a very large impact. So this should set clear that the maintaining women a low level of participation is a large lost opportunity in terms of economic growth. Now, having established that, let's now consider what is behind these low level of participation. And as I said, I will start by considering what are the transformation that create opportunities and jobs for women when an economy develops. And the three that we consider are urbanization, the shift of the economy towards services, and the shift of the economy towards exports. In this first graph, we demonstrate that indeed these transformation, the structural transformation, are creating demand for female labor force participation, female jobs. And it demonstrates this by considering what is called the gender wage gap. So normally in these economies, women earn about 60% the earning of a man in comparable men, so in terms of same age, same skill level, and similar sector. So this is the average gap. This graph shows, recalculates these gaps by comparing different sectors of the economy. And the first one is urban, and that graph shows that that gap of 60% is actually 2 points smaller for urban women when compared to urban men. So the gap, women in urban areas have still a gap, but that gap is smaller than average. For services is the same thing, and for export is the same thing. So what that means, what that shows is that the additional demand for labor in urban areas, in services, in export for women is there because it reduces the gap with men. Okay, so that's what the data tells us. Now let's examine, so that tells us that the opportunities are there because there is demand, because the wages of women go up in these sectors. So let's consider now each of them. In terms of opportunities in urban areas, these are there, and let me start maybe from the graph on the right, and this shows the correlation between we have a repeated cross-section across the world, and we look at whether countries that are more urbanized have a higher level of female labor force participation. And indeed, this is the case, as the bars show on the right-hand side. However, for SAR, South Asia, the bar is red and the correlation is negative. And this is explained by the left-hand side graph. In some sense, even if urban areas which have lower, less restrictive social norms for women to participate, they have jobs that are available for women. In South Asia, most women work in agricultural sector, or in their participation in rural areas is much higher than in urban areas. And the gap when we don't control for certain variable is about 16 percentage point. That is shown on the left-hand side by the unconditional bar, okay? Now, you may think that women participation in urban areas is lower because because the household have higher level of income, and therefore they don't need to work because the earnings for the husbands are higher. But that's not the full reason. When we control for the husband wage, participation gap between urban and rural goes down, but it's still it's still very large at about 12, 13%. So because of these difference in participation, when there is urbanization, which by the way has increased in the region, but it started at a very low level, the large number of rural women that were working and become urban, they don't find job as quickly as we wish, and so that's the negative relationship that there is in South Asia for now. The second important transformation that creates jobs for women is the shift of an economy towards services. And again, on the left hand side, you see the female labor force participation for the emerging market and development economies in the golden diamond across different sectors, and then the participation of women in these sectors. You first notice that clearly in some key sectors like retail, hospitality, and the public administration, but also education, etc., the women participation is very high, up to 70% for hospitality. These are the sectors that create a demand for women. However, there is a large gap for the South Asia region vis-a-vis the normal emerging market and developing economy, and these gaps are shown by the difference between the bars, the blue bars, and the golden diamond. Because of that difference, again, when we run a correlation between the share of GDP in services and female labor participation, we find that for most countries this correlation is positive, but not yet for South Asia, as shown in the graph on right. Now let's look at the third one, and this one is the one that finally seems to work for South Asia as well. So it's not an exception as the other two cases. Now, when an economy specializes in exportable goods and sectors, because of the fact that normally women are as productive as men, but their wages are lower, the exporting firms, since they are competing globally, they want to minimize their cost, and they employ women because they are productive and they're cheaper. Their wages are low. So this is one of the channels through which an economy that exports that is export-oriented tends to employ more women. And you can see this clearly in South Asia in some clear examples, such as Bangladesh in the garment sector and so on and so forth. This channel is positive, and however, there is also a slightly silver lining here, and that is or downside, and that is that also when you expose an economy to import competition, women tend to suffer, and it's shown here by the import bar on the right hand side. So up to now, I showed you that yes, there is a strong relationship between female labor force situation and urbanization, service specialization, and trade opening, even if for some of these South Asia is not yet at the level of other countries, but the opportunities are still created in these when there are these transformation. But why, even if there has been, and these are ongoing transformation, why female labor force participation is still low in the region? And to look at that, we need to consider the supply side. So here there's a lot of literature that we survey in the report, and I'm just showing you something quite briefly here. Two potential impediments on the supply side are the education level and the childcare provision that are shown here. But the graph on the left shows that the gender gap in terms of education have decreased significantly, and in some ways they have even reversed for some countries in the region. So education doesn't seem to be one constraint for female labor force participation, at least on the basic education. When we talk about quality of education, secondary education, there are still issues, but it doesn't seem to be the main issue. However, child provision, which is shown here on the right, it seems to be for South Asia still a constraint. Again, there's a lot of evidence here that provision of childcare is important at a higher level of income. When you provide childcare, there has to be also the demand for that. So this is more complicated than it looks, but there seems to be more work to be done here in South Asia. I'll skip this for the sake of time. That is another study on discrimination side, the fact that firms tend to still prefer male employment, but I don't have time to go through that. And let me go on to the last part of the presentation, which consider one more set of important impediments for increased female labor force participation, and that is the social norms and the legal framework. Two descriptive graphs on this topic. The first one on the left is a description of what are the personal belief and what are the social expectations in terms of an important social norm, which is that men are the main breadwinner in a household. We measure social norms. The measurement of social norms is still at the infancy. It's quite complicated. What this graph shows is that one of the most important progress in the literature, and that is distinguishing between what one person believe and what one person believe other people believe. Okay, so we distinguish the personal belief, which is basically measured as the answer to a question such as, do you believe men should be the main breadwinner in your household? And so that is the golden diamond that measure that the share of people that answer yes, I do believe, or I strongly believe. And then the second question is, do you believe, or how many of 10 of your peers, which could be friends, peers at work, neighbor, how many of 10 of your peers do you believe that men should be the main breadwinner? And what you notice here is quite interesting, is the fact that social expectation, this second order belief, is always stronger, more conservative than the personal belief. So people think they live in a society that is more conservative, and for that reason, they may hold back women participation. Now, on the right-hand side, in fact, there is something else, which is the actual formal set of norms, the laws that may help or not women participate. And this is an index that is measured by the World Bank, which is called Women, Business and the Law. And for the first year, this year, they measured not only the set of laws on the books that protect the equal rights for women on several domains that go from inheritance right to movement, travel, etc., whether these rights are protected in the same way for men and women, but also they measure the implementation of these laws, the de facto, not just the de jure, and what the graph shows is two things. One is that the most of countries are well below in terms of the legal de jure level, but also in terms of implementation, there are quite a bit of gap vis-a-vis the emerging market and developing countries. Okay, so for both these aspects, therefore, it seems that there is a restrictive environment for women at work. And when we actually measure how much restriction there is, we show that is quite impactful. These graphs show you exactly that relationship. On the left-hand side, you see the coefficients for regression of the relationship between female labor participation and the usual suspects, so the level of development, the U-curve, as I showed you at the beginning, and also this regression augmented by the legal index and the social expectation part of the norms. And the graph shows clearly that when the legal index improves, female labor participation increases, and when the restrictiveness of the social norms is stronger, female labor participation goes down. Now, the right-hand side graph shows you for each country what is the contribution of bringing the legal index and the social expectation to the level, the average level of the other countries. And that shows you that indeed, even if the coefficient seems large on the legal index, since the restriction on the norms are so large, the restriction on the negative impact of social norms is larger as a contribution than the improvement of the legal index. That's the right-hand side. Now, I finish off with one last graph, and then talk very briefly about policy. And this is another part of the study which shows that women in South Asia seems to have not only suffer not only from a child penalty, which is one of the pain points in the world, and not just developing world, but also high-income countries. When women have a child, they pay in terms of both their participation and then their wages after they return to the labor market. But in South Asia, what we observe is that even for women who don't have yet had children, their marriages, their participation goes down. So this is probably linked to the social norms, as I said, but it's clearly there. And the graph on the left-hand side shows you that when we compare women before the marriage, which is at year 0 there, women that are similar, when they marry, they and have no children, their participation goes down by almost 12 percentage points, and you don't see any difference between those who have, or at least for 1 or 2 or 3 years after the marriage, between women who have children and who don't have children. So the simple fact of getting married is a penalty beyond and above the fact that they have to take care of their children. So even if they don't have children, that's happening. And the right-hand side graph shows whether these differences, this penalty varies across different types of women, and whether women have undergo domestic violence, whether they're urban, whether their decision power is high or low. And this graph indicates that yes, there are some important variation, and these variations tend to be linked to social norms. For example, if they are more educated, their gap is lower. If they have more agency, also their gap is lower. Okay, so let me leave this last slide open here, but rather than reading it out to you, I just want to summarize by saying that there is no magic bullet. There is not a single policy that may resolve this important structural issue, and we need to intervene both on the demand side, as I said, even if there has been urbanization, there has been tertiarization in these economies in South Asia. It's not as strong as in other parts of the world, and the relationships are not fully there as in other parts of the world. So there are more intervention on the demand side, but also, as I showed you, there are issues and constraints on the supply side, and especially I put some emphasis on social norm and legal framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bussolo, and we kindly ask you to stay online as we transition into the Q&A session, which will be facilitated by Tyranny.
Hello, Mr. Bussolo. Thank you so much for your insights that you shared just now. Now we are opening for the Q&A sessions. Any burning questions from the audience right now? Please raise your hands. See none, let me quickly move to Slido. One question, I think it's on marriage penalty. One participant has asked, how can companies measure and address the economic impact of the marriage penalty on female employees?
Shall I answer now, or I wait for more questions, or?
Oh, there's another question. So what innovative business models can companies adopt to address social norms that discourage women's employment? And then the last question is, if there are two actionable opportunities that businesses can leverage to support female labor force participants, as also had highlighted in the session, and also, if the government could implement one reform, what would you suggest as the top priority? So those are the questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So, so on the first one, the marriage penalty, firms themselves are not really inside the decision of a household to as when it comes to who goes out to work, the decision is taken inside the house. So obviously these decisions are conditional on the economic environment, the fact that women face a lower wage than men is an incentive for the division of labor that favors the participation of men vis-a-vis women. But interestingly, I didn't show evidence for that. Interestingly, even when the wage gap between men and women decreases, such as in urban areas, the female labor participation goes down. So there is indeed something beyond the economic motivation of this division of labor that influence who between the husband and the wife works. And firms probably can help in two or three ways. One is to offer similar wages than men for the same jobs. And we have, I didn't talk about that, we have an experiment that we did in Pakistan where we offer a subsidy to firms if they hire a woman and for a job that is advertised, that for a job need that they have. And what we observe is that indeed there is a temporary increase in the hiring of women thanks to the subsidy, and some evidence also that the potential discrimination or opinion that hiring manager had of women improves when they experience hiring women. Now, so that's one possible policy that the government can consider, which is subsidies to women employment. Interestingly, what we observe in Pakistan in our experiment is that we do not ask, we don't provide a subsidy for the full wage of the woman, but we provide just a differential that a firm asks for employing a woman over a man, and that differential is only 12%. So we subsidize only 12%, not the full amount of the subsidy. So this policy is not as expensive as it sounds at the beginning. The other issue that was in the question was what is, I think a technical innovation was the question or something of that sort. There is evidence also in the region. I think it's a study on India, if I remember correctly, of the possibility of working from home or working remotely. This is a way of facilitating and increasing participation of women if they participate, if they work remotely. Now, is that the best solution, or is this just bypassing some restriction? It's not clear. I don't particularly like the idea that there have to be jobs that are specific for women, because women are able to do any jobs, and so we don't want to think of a remedy for their participation of creating female specific jobs. However, at least the possibility of earning a salary by working remotely improves the agency of women. When women have, we have other evidence that when women have money in their pockets and start having a network even remotely by connecting with other women, their agency increase, their bargaining power in the household increase, and things start to shift. So this is an important, potentially an important path that
Okay, Mr. Bussolo. Thank you so much for your insights. Yes. And since we're restricted on time, we also want to finish right on time and be productive with the time given. So right now we have to unfortunately finish the Q&A session. Thank you so much, Mr. Bussolo. But nevertheless, please, dear audience, if you have any questions, put into the Slido. We'll make sure to try to somehow address it some way, maybe in an article, maybe after a week, possibly after we speak with Mr. Bussolo. We'll see other opportunities. But if you have questions, the entire purpose of this is to know what you can do for any economic development and specifically to ignite to you.
Thank you, Tierney and Mr. Bussolo, for the time. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude day one of Ignite Growth Conference 2025. We've had a very long day, but a day full of rich and enlightening set of discussions. And we hope you all leave with new insights to help guide Sri Lanka's future. On behalf of the Advocata Institute team, I would like to thank all our speakers for joining us in person and as well as virtually, despite the time zone differences. Participants for staying till the very end, and partners for making today possible and such a success. We look forward to welcoming you all back tomorrow for day 2 of the conference, which will commence bright and early at 8:30 a.m. But before you leave, we kindly ask you to take a moment to complete a short survey. Your feedback is invaluable and will help us to improve our future events. Simply scan the QR code to begin. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you once again for being part of this groundbreaking event.